Hello and welcome to the Convo presented by Leadership Indianapolis. I'm Ebony Chappelle, Program and Communications Manager for Leadership Indianapolis. And today I am talking with Amy Green, who is an HR leader with global recruiting and staffing at Eli Lilly and Company. Hi, Amy, how are you?
Hi, Ebony. I'm fine. How are you?
I am doing just fine. Happy to be speaking with you. So you have on this really cool t-shirt that says Indyfluence. And just recently I did an IG live with Indie Hub to talk about, my journey as an intern. But tell us a little bit about what Indyfluence is for those that maybe don't know.
Well, Indyfluence actually started in 2019, and it was a group of Indianapolis-based HR leaders that came together across companies who said, we'd really like to be able to have an opportunity for our interns to network and really get an understanding of really how big Indianapolis and the talent community is. So we had a one-day give back event. At the end of last year, the interns gave us very, very loud feedback, and they asked for more. They wanted more interaction. They wanted to understand more of what Indianapolis had to offer. And so Indyfluence 2020 is really a first of its kind virtual Indie immersion program. When we came together across companies, Roche, Anthem, One America, Lilly, Century 21, JP Morgan, IU Health, and Allison Transmission, we were really planning on a series of events happening throughout the summer for our interns. And the three areas of focus were really meet Indy, learn from Indy, and give back to Indy. And obviously with COVID-19, we have quickly found ourselves in a virtual environment. So we had to make a game time decision to understand, would we be going virtual? Or would we end up canceling this amazing program that these interns had been asking for more of? We made the executive decision to find a social media platform to go virtual, and we shifted all of our content virtual. And we changed a little bit of the content as well to make it a little bit more conducive for a virtual networking opportunity. But that's really what this is. It's 550-ish interns coming together across 7 Indianapolis-based companies, 34 states, 3 countries, and these students are networking not only across the companies, but they're networking with individuals and leaders in Indianapolis so they can get a taste and feel of what is Indianapolis, even though they're not physically here this summer.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine, I shared that I was on the Indyfluencer page doing that IG live, and I talked a little bit about being an intern, and I couldn't imagine trying to do that in this world where you're not connected physically at all because of this virus and because of the way that things are set up right now. What are some of the ways that you all have tried to intentionally create that community with these young people, even though they can't physically be here in the city?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because the Generation Z and even the millennial generation, they're quite accustomed to using virtual technology to connect. They're also very accustomed to being in person and connecting that way, but this is not really new for them. It's an adjustment, but at the same time, they've adjusted really, really well. In terms of how are we getting them to connect, we have multiple opportunities for them to come together. There are 5 or 6 programmed events that we have throughout the summer. Ally for All training, which Roche actually supported and sponsored. Lilly is doing a Make It Safe to Thrive training next week that all the students are invited to. And then several opportunities to meet key leaders throughout the community. But those are really formal and really focused on one-way dialogue. We have multiple opportunities for them to come together every day in what we call Slack channels. Slack was a new technology I had to learn through this process. And really the students get to pick and choose the topics that they're interested in. So it could be arts and cultures, it could be community sporting events, and they can sign up for that Slack channel and have conversations each day with interns who have similar and common interests.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that is really cool that that's happening and that these avenues are available to them. You know, last summer I worked with an incredible young woman who was my intern, and her name was Grace. And just the type of relationship we were able to build and the things that she shared with me that she wanted, you know, from her future, it was just amazing to connect in that way. And I wanted to try to help her however I could. And then this year, she had her internship be canceled due to
Mm,
COVID. So things are kind of really up in the air for her right now. And I know that her story is not unique. There are other young people that are living that same thing right now that were maybe counting on money or counting on this experience to help take
yeah.
them to where it is that they need it to be next. How are you all helping to fill that need that these young people have? Is there any talk about how to help that out, though things are
Yeah.
different?
Yeah, so we have the 7 companies who've come together who have actually, we've given dollars to be able to sponsor this event. We actually did have some additional capacity, and so we did work with local organizations and companies who were not, unfortunately, able to honor their internships. But we did invite them to really participate in Indyfluence. And so there's about, I think, 80 to 100 interns somewhere in this mix that are really not a part of one of these sponsoring companies, but we've invited them in to at least have this developmental experience. Some of them are in Indianapolis, some of them are not. But we recognize that this is a bit of a crisis for all of these interns. Many of their internships have been canceled. So while we can't replicate internships, we can at least share some of this opportunity for development.
Yeah, so that's been made available just on a wider spread type of level.
We've worked with, yeah, we've worked with a couple of smaller organizations here in Indianapolis, really focusing on companies who either couldn't support an internship for the summer and inviting their interns that they would have hired, or partnering with communities who are very focused on underserved communities and inviting them in to have this experience with us.
Mhm. Yeah. So you've mentioned the partnering organizations and the sponsoring organizations that are involved in this initiative. But what advice then would you have for companies that maybe are not directly involved in how they can still use these methods of recruitment and connection to help build a pipeline for their businesses moving forward? Because we know that internships are one of those ways that happens. But one of the things that I've heard time and time again from different people in the city is, how do we retain this amazing talent that comes into our town, that participates, you know, with us, but then they leave to go elsewhere. And sometimes people encourage them to go elsewhere, like, wow, why would you stay in Indianapolis? You and I both know why they should
Mm-hmm.
stay. But what would you say to those companies that are wondering, like, how do I navigate this right now?
Yeah. So it's interesting because this comes full circle. This is actually the reason that the companies came together to identify and develop Indyfluence. It was really to retain talent in Indianapolis. We heard the statistic, which we validated, is only about 60% of the students who are graduating from Indiana institutions stay in Indiana. And so we fondly refer to it as the brain drain. We have so many students who are receiving their education here, and then they're leaving this great state, many times because they don't really understand what the state of Indiana, and really specifically Indianapolis and the surrounding community, have to offer. So that was the initial reason we all came together. For companies who are wondering, how do I do this? One, you can get involved in Indyfluence. I anticipate next year's summer intern program will be even bigger. We had approximately 900 interns we were expecting this year until some of the internships had to be canceled. So we know next year will be even bigger. If
Mm-hmm.
they can't engage in Indyfluence, there are really some great resources that we have here in Indianapolis where their focus is really trying to identify those networks. And one of them is the Indy Hub. Blake at the Indy Hub is phenomenal at finding an opportunity for every single person who's new to Indianapolis to find commonality and build a network based upon their interests. So accessing the Indy Chamber, signing your new hires up with the Indy Hub and doing an introduction is a great way for them to start building a community. Many times when people leave Lilly, especially as they're early in their career, it's not as much they're leaving Lilly as they're going home because they haven't built that sense of community here.
Mm-hmm.
So if the companies can work together to build that sense of community and link them up with resources to identify mutual interests where they have that sense of family and community here, we resolve that. And what's good for Indy is, you know, good for each and every company as well.
Yeah, yeah. You know, this is a question that I ask everyone as part of the convo, but we are living in a very interesting time. We are dealing with the effects of COVID, you know, as evidenced by the fact that this program is now entirely digital. We are also dealing with different levels of civil unrest happening throughout the country, record numbers of unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. As a leader in the field of human resources, what are some of the leadership lessons that have helped you to thrive and survive during this very trying moment that we're experiencing?
Yeah. I appreciate you asking that question. We actually modified the Indyfluence content to address the civil unrest, and we modified it on a dime so that we are addressing it with the students. One, to say we understand what's going on, but maybe most importantly is we see you. We see what's going on outside of your work and outside of your intern life, and here's how we're responding as an Indianapolis community. But going back to your question, me personally, there are certain aspects of D&I, diversity and inclusion, where I feel like, gosh, I'm pretty knowledged up. There are other areas where I'm continuing to learn. And that's the best advice I give myself every morning is just ask questions, Amy. Ask questions, be a student, because the spectrum of diversity and inclusion is very broad. And I have yet to find an individual who's an expert on every piece of that diversity and inclusion journey. So that's the biggest piece of advice I give to myself. That's what we do across our global recruiting team, is we try and educate ourselves, skill up, seek to understand is a great question that I've just kind of put in my toolbox, is help me understand what is your journey, what have you been through, what does that feel like? And just to keep it really human. Everybody's got a different story. So just to put our antennas up to listen and be aware that everybody has a unique journey, even if they look just like me.
Yeah. Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts and the work that you are doing to help empower these young people to maybe become a part of our community one day.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. I'm excited to see all of these Indyfluencers stay with us here in Indianapolis and come back next year. And Indyfluence 2021 should be even bigger and better. So we look forward to more partners as well.
Fantastic. And thank you all for tuning in for the convo. Have a wonderful day and rest of the week.